sad news to share with you this evening. Our former colleague, longtime friend, Jym Ganahl died last week.
His family held a private funeral today, but they wanted us to share the news of his passing with you. Our Colleen Marshall worked with Jym for more than 30 years, and she joins us now to talk about one of the most remarkable lives you can ever imagine.
He was a character, wasn't he?
Yes.
Jym died of natural causes on the 3rd with his daughters Lauren and Lindsay at his side. He had many grandchildren too, and he was 76 years old. Longtime viewers of NBC4 remember Jym as our chief meteorologist. He started working here back in 1979 and was part of the team the Big Four captured the hearts of Central Ohio. Doug and Mona, Jimmy and Jym. Jym, like his good friend and sidekick Ben Gelver, lived for and loved weather forecasting. Jym was a teenager when he called the news director at a television station in his hometown of Waterloo, Iowa, and told him he could do a better job than the station's current weatherman. They hired him part-time to work, and they hired him at the age of 17. He was on the air doing weather. He always told me he went on to become the youngest person ever to earn the meteorology seal from the National Weather Service. Of course, 1 year after getting here, Jym helped hire Benny Gelber, and they often called each other Batman and Robin. Jym had endless weather knowledge, including weather lore, like knowing the temperature by counting the number of cricket chirps in a certain amount of time and adding 40. I would say, Jym, I'm not doing math.
Yep.
Or 3 snows after the forsythia bloom. He was really something else. He loved weather. He loved the people of Central Ohio. And I know, you know, Dave, I hear you, and of course, he lost a lot of weight to get into that uniform.
I remember that right when I started here. He lost a ton back then.
Yeah. And he struggled with his health for a long time. He did die of natural causes, as we said. But I hear you and Benny back there telling each other weather stories, and I think some things never change. He really was something, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want it to sound bad. Like, the way I think of him, he was a big kid in the best way possible. Like
a goofy big kid.
Yes. He never took, I mean, I remember after he had one of his health scares when he was here back, I think in 2015-ish, and he came back from it and acted like it was no big deal, like whatever, like I had a head cold. And we're like, Jym, that was serious. And he just nothing really got him down. Watching all those clips that you had in that story, that was I think my favorite thing. Every night was, if he was live somewhere, you knew you were going to see something hilarious because his personality was so inviting, and he was a legend, but he wasn't overwhelming to anyone. He was just he was your neighbor, like, to everybody. And he would go out live, and kids that had just watched him for a couple of years maybe, or some that had been watching him their whole lives,
kids loved him,
felt that connection with them.
Well, two quick stories on that front. You saw that clip of video there, Jym out doing football Friday night tailgates with And so Jym, you know, as he's nearing the end of his career, was still able to go out and connect with kids. Still able to go out and they recognized him and they cared about him. And the running joke I had when I first got to town here was the 2 most famous people in Columbus were both named Jym. Ganahl and Tressel. and you know, but you could have made that joke 10 years before about, you know, who's the most famous people in town. You go, oh, Woody Hayes and Jym Ganahl. Or even, you know, Jimmy Crumb. You know, like, he was that big.
After that heart scare that he had, Gary and I visited him in the hospital, and he said, you know, Gary said, yeah, it's tough, Jym. You got to change your diet, because Gary'd been through it. And he said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to change my diet. Like, first week he came back, he said, Cole, come here. I want you to try this. It's amazing. It was chicken fries from Burger King. I said, Jym. And he said, but they're great. Just try one. He
told us that's what they make medicine in hospitals for. He goes, I'm like, Jym, no.
Yeah, but what a good guy.
He lived life. Yes, he really did. And I mentioned earlier, I was a young producer when I started working with Jym, and Molly and I, the other producer at the time, we called it grandpa energy because he always made us feel like his kids, part of his family.
And as much as we're saying how funny he was, he had such a depth and breadth of knowledge about weather and forecasting. He covered the floods out west and just did a remarkable job. He covered it for really our station, but other stations around the country. And, you know, I know that you and Ben learned from him and learned with him.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, we talk about his personality because he was so much on taking care of the weather stuff.
Yeah.
But he always it was all about just being with everyone. And I mentioned it, you know, but he cared about everyone more than himself. More than anyone I probably ever have known.
And
like
so selfless.
Yes, with everybody.
Absolutely selfless.
Even strangers. If a stranger called up needing help with something, he felt their story immediately. And he would tell us about this person called up, they lost this or that, and he was just entrapped in that, and that was his feeling. And that was his big heart. He had a huge heart.
Yeah.
He was the oldest in his family too. I think there were like 5 or 6
That's right.
kids.
Yeah, big family.
And he was the oldest and really cared about all of them too.
Yeah.
So our deepest sympathies to Lauren and Lindsay and his son-in-law Jason and all of the grandchildren, because, you know, he was a presence and we're all going to miss him.
Decades of memories and stories and just an incredible personality for Central Ohio to get to know as well. So Jym Ganahl, you will be missed. We'll be back right after this.